Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cybersecurity Quick Fixes. I have two goals in this presentation. First of which is to help you lock down the data in your law firm to better protect it. The second is to get our schedule back on track. Unfortunately, our amazing speakers this morning went a little longer than we intended. So rather than the 30 minutes I've been allotted, I'm down to 25. But fortunately, quick is in the title. I'm Joshua Lenon. I'm the lawyer in residence at Clio. I'm an attorney admitted into New York. I'm also a certified privacy professional with the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And I've got a quick agenda. This is not advancing. It's advancing on the preview, but not on the big screen. Let's try it again. Perfect. All right, I've got a quick agenda. Why cybersecurity? Your top cybersecurity risk, the thing you should be worried about the most. Then we'll go into those quick fixes, and then we'll have some recovery tips for if and when you have to deal with a cyber incident, and then we'll try and save a couple minutes for questions. So, why cybersecurity? The rules say you need it. So I think there are 4 reasons for lawyers to focus on cybersecurity as part of their operations. There's ethical, there's legal, there's operational continuance, and there's fiscal. And we'll go through each of these really briefly. But those of you familiar with the rules of professional conduct will know that in 37 states, you now have a rule of technological competency, taking a look at the benefits and risks of technology. And that's not just the technology that you are using, but also the technology that your clients are using. But in terms of cybersecurity, we're really going to look at what's in your office. And 1.6, of course, you shall keep information confidential. Importantly, that you shall make reasonable efforts, emphasis mine, to lock down your information. Now, there are 2 things that I think you should take away from that. One is that reasonable means not perfect, because there is no perfect security. Even the tips I'm going to give you today will eliminate many of the vectors of risk, but will never entirely eliminate it. The second is reasonable is changing over time. And so all the steps I'm showing you are easy, and because they are easy, they are reasonable, and you should be taking those steps now. So reasonable efforts is actually based upon a test in the comments of the model rules, where they talk about the cost, the difficulty to implement, the imposition of it upon your own ability to do the work, or the ability of your client to work with you. Everything you're going to see actually moves really quickly. So the American Bar Association, in their formal opinion 477, came out with kind of their first guidelines when it came to cybersecurity. And this particular one took a look at communicating with a client and understanding that not all communication channels are secure. How many people email their clients? How many of your clients email you incessantly? Yeah. But unfortunately, email is not by default a secure communication channel. It's sent in an unencrypted format. It goes through a whole bunch of different pathways to get to you. If you're using AOL, AOL has your email. If you're using Gmail, Gmail has your email. And so you need to take extra steps to either secure that communication channel or know when it's an inappropriate channel to use. So in this particular opinion, the example that they gave was representing an employee in an employment dispute. Don't use their work email. It can be that simple to secure both yourself and your client, but that's an example of where the ethical rules are starting to mandate cybersecurity and putting the burden upon you to secure yourself. When we look at what was given as guidance, and again, I'm not going to read all this, the clock is counting down, they actually give what I think is a really good checklist for some of the questions you should be asking yourself, right? Steps that you should be taking. Understand the nature of the threat. Is the nature that this information is going to become public to the greater public, or is it that I'm worried about a particular person getting access to this information, right? So I'm representing a spouse in a divorce. Does the other spouse have access to their computer? That's a cybersecurity risk, but a minor one, as opposed to is Rupert Murdoch's entire media empire trying to hack my voicemail for my celebrity divorce. that's a different category. And being able to understand the nature of that threat and moderate yourself accordingly is some of the things that you should be considering. I think number 6 is especially important. We'll get into that one in a second. Train your lawyers and your non-lawyers about technology and information security. The buck always stops with lawyers when it comes to our ethical duties. So this will become especially important as we move into our second area of today's presentation. When we look at our legal obligations, unfortunately, we also have to balance state, federal, and client business concerns when it comes to our legal obligations for cybersecurity. For example, every state and Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia have breach notification laws that apply to everyone. And so if you have a cybersecurity incident, you may need to know what exactly do I need to disclose and to whom, which differs on a state-by-state basis. This is actually a very handy list published by Perkins Coie, a big law firm, but I actually have this bookmarked for if I ever need to know this information, I can just go immediately to whatever jurisdiction it is and grab it. You also need to know your federal obligations. The FTC, under their Section 5 enforcement powers, has started really ramping up cybersecurity enforcement. Now, they're not coming after solo and small law firms. They're coming after giant corporations. But it's actually really interesting that we see this appeal in 2015 actually recognizing their cybersecurity authority, recognizing that the rules that they're promulgating through their consent decrees are now kind of becoming the default federal law for privacy. There's actually a really good, simple PDF that they put out, Start with Security. You can download it. It walks through all of their current guidelines. They're all pretty much common sense and align with a lot of the topics we'll be giving you. And the last area of legal concern that you may have is your client's own specific business practices. So, for example, if you're representing a doctor or an insurance company, you will have HIPAA, the Health and Information Privacy Protection Act, kind of pushed down from your clients onto your own operations. Same with people who deal with debt collections. You'll have the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and other concerns may be applicable to your law firm, and yet you are responsible for knowing these. The last thing, second to last thing that I think you need to know is operations continuance. In 2017, employees of DLA Piper walked into their office to see this whiteboard, which said, "Don't turn on anything." And so 3,600 lawyers and paralegals and secretaries for roughly a period of 6 weeks didn't know if they could actually work on a day-to-day basis because they had been hit with the NotPetya malware attack. And was this law firm targeted by this attack? No, not at all. This was an attack that was sent around the world, impacting small businesses, private individuals, hospitals, governments, and DLA Piper, who had to go, in many instances, before a court and say, we honestly can't get to our files because we haven't figured out how to buy Bitcoin to pay the ransom. No judge is going to love that idea. So keeping the lights on is a cybersecurity issue, and keeping the lights on, I think, leads to a fiscal issue as well. We know that the cost of data breaches, as reported by IBM's 2019 report, is approximately $150 per record. And so while the average cost of a data breach for this report was around $4 million, which again is higher than we will see for solo and small law firms, at $150 a record, it still becomes a substantial burden upon your business, especially because we know from our friends at Logical that the average case currently has about 1.3 gigabytes of data and 6.5 million pages. Oh, I'm sorry, 130 gigabytes of data. So you guys have a lot of information that if it gets out, could be potentially very expensive for you to have to clean. So with why cybersecurity out of the way, it's your ethical duty, it's your legal responsibility, it actually keeps your business open, and it keeps your bank account full. Let's talk about what your top security risk is. It's actually really simple. It's your employees. So according to the 2019 Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, 59% of all security incidents and data breaches were caused by insiders. Now, when we break this down, there were lots of different other factors along the way, and we'll take a look at those really quickly. For example, if 69% were perpetrated by outsiders, meaning that they initiated something, but then it was the employees who kind of left the door open for them, right? So that meant that it was a social attack where somebody targeted that individual using knowledge they gained about them. Or it was a malware link in an email. This is actually the most common in professional organizations. Somebody gets an email, it has a document attached to it, very common. We click on it, it runs something, and suddenly all of your contacts are getting really suspicious emails from you, and your files are going down the encryption drain. There are errors that were caused, and 15% of most professional service organizations also had some misuse as well. Somebody who threw in the USB key, grabbed the files, and took them home. Right? And we know that most law firms, by ILTA's 2018 tech report, just aren't necessarily investing and planning on preventing employees being the weakest link. For example, 24% have no security training. The one thing that the ABA kind of recommended, and I recommended you need to have as a part of your organization. 37% have no intrusion detection system, 72% have no data loss prevention, which is the ability to just stop data from walking away, and 96% have no two-factor authentication. This is probably, I think, the most shocking number to me, because this is also the easiest quick fix for you guys to implement, and the most effective when it comes to securing your data. So Gartner tells us, that is not going forward. Yep, Gartner tells us that through 2022, 95% of all security failures with cloud services like Clio will be your fault. Thank you. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that Clio shouldn't be helping you secure and prevent this information, and that you shouldn't be moving towards a model that actually protects you from yourselves and from your employees. And let's take a look at how we eliminate those cyber risk vectors. HIPAA actually has a model of 3 requirements for cybersecurity: administrative, physical, and technical. And while they don't organize them in this flowchart format, they're like pick as appropriate, I actually think you really want to look at your security protocols as moving from administrative through physical to technical whenever possible. So what does that mean? Let's take a look at malware via email. We have an administrative policy: don't click on malware. We took some time, we took a look at some examples that we found in Google on what not to click. We went through it, we're all good. Instead, we could move to something that is technical. I can install a tool called Mimecast. It's a very expensive tool, it's used by big law firms, that actually reads our email as it comes in and says, that's a virus, that's a virus, that's a virus. And so instead of you hoping that your employees paid attention and can figure out what is malware, instead, we prevent them from even seeing it. And that's an example of moving from administrative to technical, and where I think you should be moving your cybersecurity operations as it goes forward. Is it that simple? No. You're actually going to need to do a cycle that takes a look at vetting your technology, setting it up with those technical controls, training your employees for the gaps that will continue to exist. They always will. Making sure you run your backups frequently, monitoring for changes, and then doing the whole thing over again. And if that sounds exhausting, it is. But you can minimize a huge amount of this work as you go forward. The ABA, in their formal opinion of 2008, 451, actually has a good checklist for how to vet vendors. This is mostly focused on service organizations, but I think a lot of it applies to technology as well. Like, ask for reference checks. Are they agreeing to confidentiality as a part of their service for you? What is their availability and accessibility for relief from violations? What's in the contract that protects you? And then the ABA also put out this vendor cybersecurity checklist. That's from the Cybersecurity Task Force of the ABA. This one's really intensive. It's about 40 pages. I've read it on your behalf. But it does give you good high-level ideas of what questions you should be asking. I've included a link in the presentation where you can download all the resources that I'm talking about. And I recommend taking a look at this one, but it's not a Bible so much as a guideline. So what are some of the things that they recommend and that I think you should be doing in order to make this happen? Use transparent technology. This is a page on Clio's website, app.clio.com/security, where we have 3 different certifications that can be viewed by anybody, customers and non-customers alike. McAfee is actually a white hat hacker service that tests our servers on a daily basis, making sure that known vulnerabilities are closed. So I don't just believe the guys on our security team that we've set things up correctly. We have a third party double check it. And if you click on that blue link, they'll tell you the results of our last report. Are we secure? Are we up to date? Trustee takes a look at our privacy policy and makes sure that we're living up to our promises. And this last one, which is kind of ugly, is our encryption certification. When you click on it, you get a report like this that tells you our encryption is live, that we're using the proper formats, and that we have the ability for you to get a hold of us if something is going wrong. And you can even report us to this third party if we're not responsive. It's that type of transparency, that trust but verify, that I think you need to have when it comes to cybersecurity. Next, secure your data. Everybody here has the ability to encrypt their hard drives. It's one click in Mac, it's one click in Windows. And if you haven't turned that on by the end of the day, you are not secure. One click. It's reasonable to do that. Next, make sure that when you're communicating information online, that you're doing so through an encrypted connection. Clio forces you to go to encrypted when you visit our website before you even log in, but it's this little padlock, and more importantly, this HTTPS that tells you that your computer and the computer you're talking to on the other side of the internet have agreed to an encryption protocol and are preventing people from reading it as the information passes back and forth. Next, ration data access. This is an example of permissions in Clio. Not everybody needs access to everything. In smaller law firms, this is actually more difficult to control. You rely on your teammates to help you. Your office administrator may also be your bookkeeper, right? So make sure where you can, you ration data access to where it's appropriate. And for all of your users, use passwords intelligently. This is probably the hardest thing that I'm going to recommend that you do here today, but it's a great quick fix. 1, get a password manager so you don't have to remember all your passwords. Use that password manager to store the craziest passwords that you can enforce upon your employees. So here, for example, Clio has the ability to set what we call strong passwords. It eliminates the ones that we know are very common, like my password is password, or my password is 12345. They just won't allow those to happen. And it requires a certain level of entropy. And what that means is, how many monkeys typing on a typewriter would it take to guess your password? We aim for about 1 million over around 300 years. So with that, you're going to get a password that will, 1, be impossible to memorize, but 2, will also be really difficult to crack. And that's where the password manager comes in. I can't memorize it, so let it store it for me and log in for me whenever I do it. I use LastPass. I actually really like the functionality of it. There are several others out there that I recommend you take a look at. The next thing is make your passwords expire. This is a huge pain in the butt. But at some point, one of your employees is going to write their password down on a Post-it note, stick it on their computer. It's going to fall off in 2 days and get picked up by a housekeeper, and they will not change their password. They won't even tell you, oh, I lost that Post-it note. So instead, if I can set something automated, and here, this is an example set to 180 days. You can pick whatever level you want. It'll force you to create a new password, store that automatically in your LastPass account. It'll recognize that that's happening for you, and you don't have to worry about that Post-it note that walked out the door on the bottom of somebody's shoe. No. Once you make it hard to guess your password, now make it hard to log in. This is two-factor authentication. You guys have this built in the Clio mobile app right now. I actually use a tool called Google Authenticator, and for every tool that I use that allows two-factor authentication, I turn it on. In a study that was done by Google, they found that when using two-factor authentication, it blocks 100% of automated attacks, 99% of bulk phishing attacks, and 90% of direct targeted attacks. What does it look like when I go to log into my Gmail, my Clio account, my LastPass password? Once I enter my username and password, it then asks for a second time-limited code, all right? So I have to then go to this app, I open it up, I type in these numbers, and there's a little clock clicking down, and at the end of like 10 seconds, a new set of numbers flash up. And only if I enter those numbers correctly am I allowed to log into my tool. And it blocks 100% of automated attacks. Why would you not turn that on? One bit of guidance. When you turn this on, you will be offered the chance to download backup codes, like 8 or 9 of these little 6-digit numbers that you can use in the event you ever misuse your phone, lose your phone, or it's broken, or anything. Download those, store them someplace secure. You will eventually need them. If you turn this on at Clio, lose your phone, and then call us to turn it off, we tell whatever strange person that's calling us over the phone to be like, no, we don't give access to private accounts. No. Why? Because we don't give access to private accounts. It's your guys' information. And you'll unfortunately have to jump through a bunch of hoops to prove your identity before we can turn it off on your behalf. So download those codes. It really will save you time. Next, communicate via secure channels. The majority of scams happening to real estate lawyers right now happen because a client emails them saying, hey, I changed my bank account. And the lawyer doesn't realize that the client is not emailing from their original email address. So pick secure channels early, communicate that to your clients and your staff, and as soon as there is an attempt to change a communication channel, that's when you go back to the original channel and verify it, right? Oh, hey, we got this email saying that you want us to return your deposit in trust. I'm gonna call you up and make sure that's exactly what you want to have happen. And that alone will prevent so much fraud through trust that will happen to your accounts. This is an example of Clio's secure message system. It's a great place to actually have a communication channel that you control on behalf of your clients, that they can't take away from you. And I also liked Glenn Greenwald's recommendation of the app Signal, which you can download for Android and for iPhone. It's a great little texting tool. The downside of Signal is that it's really difficult to get those messages into your system of record like Clio. So it's secure, but it's separate. Sorry, I'm rushing because I have like 2 minutes left. Next, backups. Backups all the freaking time. I actually recommend that lawyers have 2 sets of backups. One, a cloud-based backup. Here's an example of how to turn on Amazon's Clio's data escrow, where we will automatically push the data to Amazon, your own private Amazon account, where they'll hold it for you in case anything ever happens to Clio. But I also highly recommend that you have a local backup as well. Hard drives are cheap. They plug into your computer via USB. They come with the ability to have built-in encryption turned on. Hint, do that. So why not have a local backup? I do it, and I use Clio. It only makes sense. Last, monitor access. This is actually, I think, the toughest part for running your own law firm, but knowing who's logging in when and what they're doing is actually really crucial. This is a session example from Clio where I can take a look and be like, Rob, he's been logging in from all these places, the same places for the last year, and now there's a new weird one. Let me ask Rob what's going on. Did he lose his phone? Do I need to turn off his mobile access and put it onto his new phone? And I can also look at things like the firm feed within Clio to look for oddities as well. But it's embarrassing when you lose your phone, and not everybody's going to tell you that happens. So it's good to be able every now and then to check this type of information. Doing this will eliminate 80 to 90% of the cyber risk that you face as a business, period. Just these quick steps that I covered in the last couple minutes. But that doesn't mean that we've totally eliminated risk. So how do you recover? The ABA comes through again with their opinion 483, where they mostly talk about when this happens, it's time to start talking to your clients, letting them know it happened, the degree at which it happened, and how are we recovering from it. And also remember that this duty may extend to past clients as well. But in terms of rebuilding your organization, I actually think their disaster planning opinion, 482, offers the better guidance. How to really rebuild. That's what you should be taking a look at. And if you follow these quick fixes, you're probably going to deal with 50% of your reasons for cybersecurity. Your ethics and your operations will be taken care of. I've done my reasonable due diligence. I've kept the lights on, but you still potentially have some risk when it comes to fiscal and legal concerns. And that's why I think your greatest cybersecurity quick fix is to get some cyber liability coverage. Only 34% of law firms have that currently. Now, that's a whole nother presentation on what type you should get, what type of clues you should look for, but I do want to leave you with an example from ALPS, A-L-P-S. They are a professional liability insurer that offers cybersecurity coverage. They have 2 levels, one that just kind of covers the bank account issues, and another level that helps you with talking to your clients and informing them and navigating your legal requirements. So if you have a good cybersecurity policy, those 2 remaining reasons to be secure are taken care of. And now I can just focus on logging into Clio, doing my 2FA, which you'll do like 3 to 4 times a day, and then getting back to work. 38 seconds to spare. I'm Joshua Lenon. I do want to tell you that we have some of our great cybersecurity team down at the Clio lab. They're happy to answer questions about cybersecurity, both in Clio and outside of it. So please take advantage of them and any questions that I can answer. I think we see one in the back. Can we get a mic there? Or shout it, I'll repeat it. That's a great step. It's actually really important when you're using public Wi-Fi to make sure you have some type of security. So a VPN is an example of that. That's a virtual private network. It's where I tell my computer to go to a specific computer that then goes to the internet. And so it prevents a lot of man-in-the-middle attacks, but it's not encryption, and you should add encryption on top of that. So look for that HTTPS that we talked about, or make sure your VPN is offering some type of encryption with it. Second question, and then you, and then we'll have to cut it there. In the far back. So I think that's a reasonableness question, to be perfectly honest. I don't think you should be doing that all the time, unless it's incredibly easy and it doesn't cost you anything extra. So go through that what is reasonable guideline from 1.6 and see, if I can just turn this on and it doesn't really slow anything down, then yeah, it's reasonable. And last question here, and then we've got to wrap it, guys. So recovery, I can tell you from just organizations in general, not law firms, it's at least weeks. And it's often around 3 months to get back to full operation, and then a much longer period to deal with the other recovery efforts. So falling prey to one of these things is just a huge loss of time and money. It's somewhat inevitable. Unfortunately, there's always going to be risk, but you can really mitigate it. Now, why aren't more lawyers looking at cyber liability insurance? They think their professional liability insurance covers this, and it doesn't. All right. I apologize for the abbreviated nature of this session. I'm really happy to continue this conversation out in the hallway or down in Clio Labs. Thank you very much, everybody.